Hello, I'm Chloe Stewart, and I'm a PhD candidate in the neuroscience program at Western. Today, I'm going to be talking about my research on the way that our bodies feel when we feel guilty. The autonomic nervous system, or ANS, is responsible for the largely unconscious regulation of the internal organs. The ANS has two main divisions, the parasympathetic division, which is responsible for relaxation and energy conservation, and the sympathetic division, which is involved in responding to threats. Both divisions operate tonically and complementarily. However, in response to external or internal stimuli, one or the other may predominate. The ANS is responsive to our emotional states, generating physiological responses to emotional experiences. Here you can see how the onset of anger generates changes throughout the body. This bodily activation has been well characterized in basic emotions like happiness and sadness. However, while it is often described as a very visceral experience, little research to date has investigated the role of the ANS in guilt. Guilt is the awareness that some type of harm to another has resulted or may result from one's action or inaction. Though it is aversive, guilt is necessary to successful social functioning. Here you can see how individuals who are low in guilt are more likely to commit delinquent acts at work and in their daily lives, while for individuals high in guilt, the opposite is true. A connection between guilt and the body can be seen in frontotemporal dementia, in which the ability to feel guilt is gradually lost, concomitant with unusual or absent physiological reactions to emotions. In the trolley dilemma and its footbridge variant, in which one must decide whether to harm one person in order to save others, patients with FTD show less physiological reactions and less emotional distress when compared to those with Alzheimer's or to healthy controls. In this study, we sought to understand how the body experiences guilt in healthy adults. We hypothesized that guilt is associated with a physiologic signature that is common across individuals and distinct from other emotions. Since guilt is an emotion that should motivate one to act, whether to repair the harm done or to apologize to the harmed party, we predicted that we would observe largely sympathetic activation patterns throughout the effectors examined. 96 healthy adults completed a questionnaire about their opinions and behaviors. They then underwent a video task in which pre-generated statements comparing their behaviors unfavorably to peers were presented in advance of videos designed to elicit guilt or one of the comparison emotions, while continuous physiological recordings were taken. A repeated measures MANOVA confirmed that there is a pattern of physiological activations that can usefully distinguish between emotions, including guilt. We found that the electrogastrogram, which measures the regular contraction of the stomach muscles, distinguished guilt from every other comparison emotion. Stomach contractions in guilt slowed when compared to amusement, neutral, and pride, indicating increased sympathetic activation. However, stomach contractions were faster in guilt compared to disgust and sadness, indicating increased parasympathetic activation relative to those emotions. Swallowing rate was found to distinguish guilt from disgust and sadness, with individuals swallowing less in guilt compared to either emotion. This indicates relative activation of the sympathetic nervous system in guilt, and may be related to the dry mouth often experienced in times of heightened anxiety. Electrodermal activity, the amount of sweat produced by the skin, was found to distinguish guilt from amusement, disgust, and pride. We found that electrodermal activity in guilt decreased relative to these emotions, indicative of sympathetic withdrawal. This was an unexpected finding, as we anticipated greater sympathetic activation in guilt. This may be reflective of a degree of passivity felt during the video task, as participants knew that there was no action that could be taken to alleviate guilt in the short term, and no way to halt the guilt-inducing behavior. Thus, sympathetic withdrawal predominated, as there was no need for increased ANS activation to prepare for or prompt a behavioral response. In conclusion, we found autonomic patterns that may be used to distinguish emotions, including guilt. Guilt is associated with mixed parasympathetic and sympathetic activation and deactivation throughout the body, including a high sympathetic influence on swallowing, mixed influence on electrogastrogram, and sympathetic deactivation in electrodermal activity. Thank you for your time, and thank you to the members of my lab. I welcome any questions.